We'll get that fixed. All right, good evening. This is the regularly scheduled April meeting of the Budget Committee of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. We have three appropriation items at the front of the agenda. Then we'll have an executive session to discuss some legal matters. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been hearing in the RTM district meetings and committee meetings. And then if we're lucky, we'll vote on 7 sets of minutes from the various meetings that the Budget Committee had during the budget process. So the first item on the agenda, 87, $13,500 approval to use funds from the Asia Society Board of Ed. This is the number that's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. Turns out we have a typo in our agenda, but we'll fix that when we get there.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
It's Jim Rickey, for the record, Managing Director of Operations.
Irene Parisi, Assistant Superintendent.
So the request before you this evening is an appropriation or the acceptance of a donation for $13,000, $13,500. This may seem familiar. This seems to be an annual appropriation and donation request. And I don't think we'll have to do this next year, as I believe it's in the budget resolution, or plan to be in the budget resolutions for the years moving forward.
Really?
Yes.
I don't remember seeing any change in budget resolutions that would permit this.
I think we had it in there with the Board of Education's proposed resolution moving forward. We could talk about that for next year.
Yeah, I don't
It's not-
remember
it's not
seeing
now.
it in the budget resolutions that are being submitted before that the BET approved, or that are
I'll
being.
take a look then. Be happy to.
So questions about this item?
No.
How do you spend the money?
There's a number of,
So there's a number of
Uses?
initiatives. One is, you see $1,000 for travel and training. That is a requirement that an attendee attend the National Chinese Language Conference. So that's that one item. The other $12,500 is for program supplies related to the grant.
And who gets the supplies?
the teachers at the high school level.
So it's just high school?
Correct.
Any other
Is this the
questions?
same amount as last
Sorry.
year?
It might be a difference of $1,000.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Other questions? Nope. Can I have a motion?
You want to do it now?
Sure,
I move
let's just do
that we approve this $13,500 for the BOE as a routine item.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 0. Okay. The next item, you said to me earlier, was a typo. It's-
Correct. So this is a transfer request, which was heard and approved by the Board of Education. The dollar amount for this transfer request is $30,000. It looks like the $13,000 was carried forward. The $30,000 request is what you see in the backup that was provided as well.
All right, so we'll accept the correction of the typo and talk a little bit about the transfer.
Sure. So we've discussed this before. I've been here before. We had centralized professional learning this year, and as you know, you developed the budget with the intent of spending it in certain ways, but as the work evolves and during implementation, things change. The significant shift this year, which is within the justification, is that we've had some turnover. So there's been an increase of need of training our IB teachers, because that's part of the requirement for being an IB certified school, as well as those that are in AVID sites, such as Central, Western, and the high school. So, and there's significant cost for travel and for the registration fees. Also, with the increase in the approach to advancing our advanced placement courses, those teachers also access professional learning from Taft. And again, that's at a significant cost, and they require the updated training. And finally, we've been partnering with Teachers College now as an approach to closing the achievement gap. So again, as those increase, the participation increases at Teachers College on site and in on our schools, again, I had to shift the dollars where we were going to spend it. Again, during implementation, things change. This will be the final transfer. This I've calculated and worked with the finance office that this is what we need to get us to the end of the year, and we have certainly built the budget for next year in anticipation of this spending trend.
Yeah, well, it's not unusual to have to move some money around. You have a large budget, and you, as has been pointed out many times, don't always know how many students you're going to have, and therefore how many teachers and what their backgrounds are going to be, so.
Those were the significant areas, though, where we saw a bit of an uptick.
Is this the only thing you're doing with Teachers College?
We've been doing a lot with their writing initiative, and we have on-site staff developers, which has really been a shift in teacher practice, and they'll spend the day or days with us in kind of an institute fashion, but they also give us tickets to their professional learning at Teachers College, and so we do send teams of administrators and teachers to work with some nationally recognized folks, such as Lucy Calkins and Heidi Hayes-Jacobs, who they partner with. So that's what we're focused on right now.
So, do you have a rough idea of how many teachers and administrators interact with the Teachers College people over the course of the year?
There are 6 of our schools, so all of the educators within those schools are interacting with a staff developer, again, on site or at Teachers College. We try not to decimate the school during the school day, so you could have a team of 6 that are attending, along with our humanities coordinator, and sometimes coaches attend.
And would they go more than once in the year?
We try not to. We try to cycle through everyone so that at least everyone in that building or those 6 schools have an experience.
Obviously, this isn't the budget for all of that.
No, and there is some that's within our humanities budget, but again, the majority of professional learning lives within the SIPL budget, which is in my location.
Any questions about this?
And just follow on, and what is the total budget for this then?
For all of professional learning,
Mhm.
I take care of the entire district, so 16 schools, 1,000 teachers, and then the administrators. It's approximately $140,000.
Okay.
Okay. So may I have a motion on this one?
So I'll move $30,000 for professional learning for the Board of Education,
Routine?
routine item.
It's a transfer, so it doesn't need to go to the full BET.
And I'd second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 400.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Police Department, $29,625, approval to use distracted driving enforcement.
Good afternoon. This is for a distracted driving, high visibility enforcement, and we submitted a grant request. And this is a federal grant for $29,625. It does require a 25% match, and we intend, as part of the request, to have that taken from the amount of money we received back from the state for previous enforcement on grants. So, this is a very successful program. Just some statistics that just came out this week, 1/3 of all fatal accidents are relating to distracted driving, so it's an important part of the enforcement plan.
I'm surprised it's not 2/3 from what I see out there. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Roland, help me out here. I just want to understand how the citation fees, how the revenue sharing with the state, how does that work? Is that generally in our revenue line? Is that just revenue income to the town, or is that a reserve?
It comes into the town.
And so when we do a 25% match like that, how's that budgeted? What is that coming out of that?
This would be basically pulling it out of the revenue,
Well, I mean,
appropriating it.
yeah.
So basically, we're appropriating 29 and getting 3/4 of that.
But the quarter that's coming out of our funds, how is that?
That's basically an additional appropriation in the general fund, the way this is.
And so when we approve this today, don't we have to be today approving that appropriation?
You're approving the entire 29,625 appropriation.
Oh, I see, but 3/4 is coming back on a reimbursement, is that
Yes.
it? I see, okay. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So we have other distracted driving initiatives, or is this the only one?
Well, we have what they call the STEP program, which is the Strategic Traffic Enforcement Plan, and this is just one of the grants. We also have a rural roads. I think I've been here just probably 6 months ago asking for similar requests for an acceptance of that grant. So Lieutenant Sluicer is pretty active in applying for any grants that come up. We don't get all of them, but because of our good enforcement record, and they take a look, that's part of the application, we usually do get some of this. And the philosophy is, the more tickets we give, the less accidents are, and it really comes to fruition every year. It does keep our accidents down. So.
It's a tough problem. It's hard for me to quite see how, this isn't a comment about the police department, it's hard to see how we can have much impact on this. People are really hooked on their phones and devices, and I've seen some really amazing things going on, as we probably all have, on the roadways, often at high speeds or on curvy roads in backcountry Greenwich. It just, I don't understand how anybody's still left alive.
No, some people are just lucky. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, often what happens is they end up being lucky and some other person is unlucky. Okay, we have a motion on this?
So I'll move that we approve, what is our total amount here?
The 29,625.
29,625 for the police department for its fiscal year 17 distracted driving high visibility enforcement grant program.
I'd second that. Routine?
And that is a routine item.
I'd second that.
Thank you very much.
All in favor?
Oh, aye.
4-0.
Wait for the vote. Sorry.
I love it when you get taken for granted. You know,
Yeah.
it's just- All right. So, somebody here from the law department? Oh, there you are. Sorry, sneaked in. All right.
So I make a motion to move into executive session
Second that.
To discuss,
to discuss.
Actual litigation.
pen- Litigation. pending
Okay.
litigation.
So since we've been told that it's optional for us to take a vote on the Luciano versus Town of Greenwich case, I'm going to move that we in fact take a vote on the proposed settlement in the Luciano case.
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So that motion having passed, I'm now making a motion that we recommend that we as a committee recommend to the full BET the settlement of the Luciano case at $25,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Need any more votes from us? Okay. Thank you. All right, this brings us to old business. We didn't have any on the agenda, and new business, which is a discussion of what we've been learning from the RTM subject matter and district meetings, as well as, I guess, whatever conversation there was at the RTM meeting the other night. So excuse me, so we've all been attending probably both subject matter and district meetings. I think at least in the meetings I've been to, what I've been seeing is people happy to see a lower proposed mill rate increase, the lowest we've had in decades. On the other hand, there is some anxiety about what's going on in Hartford, and some discussion about what other communities are doing with regard to the possibility that Hartford would, in effect, force communities to either cut services dramatically or increase their property taxes substantially. And on the flip side of that, there is some conversation because, in fact, what the BET has done this year in its budget as it goes to the RTM is to create some room there that we could use if we needed to accommodate something that ended up being mandated from Hartford. there's been some discussion that we shouldn't have done that, that we should just take all that money out of the budget and give the taxpayers a very low or even no increase in the property tax for this coming year. And then if Hartford lays some additional burden on us, then we would have to either say to the departments, well, actually, we couldn't say to the departments because by then they would have a budget that had been approved. We'd have to go back and appropriate more money or tell the state we weren't going to pay the bill, which would be amusing all by itself. We should have kept the town attorney around for that conversation. I don't have any sense of, from the few conversations I had, of where the RTM will go on that subject, but I think it's pretty clear that the Budget Overview Committee and maybe the Finance Committee will both urge the members to try to find a way to reduce the budget to, if you will, recapture the money that we've left in the budget. We left the money in the budget in a way that gave us a lot of flexibility, leaving some of it by, in effect, not taking it out of reserve accounts, leaving some of it by going ahead and continuing our practice of raising the capital tax by $3 million, as we have most years for the last 15 or 16 years. So I think this is an opportunity for us to talk about this a little bit, see what kinds of things we're hearing. We're going to be attending, at least in my case, different district meetings in the May cycle. I don't know whether all of you are going back to same places or different places. So we're going to different places. So that's going to, there's good and bad about doing it that way, but that's the way it is. I'm out of town the night of the Budget Overview Committee meeting, so I won't be at that meeting, but I know several of you will. So, observations about or thoughts about the documents here? I will say, for what it's worth, I went through pretty carefully the document that the Budget Overview Committee distributed around town, and in my conversations with the districts, they already had that document, including all of its errors. And it was complicated trying to unravel the errors for them because they don't have much familiarity with some of the numbers that are in that handout. And so when you say to them, these two numbers don't belong together, they're actually different things, it's hard, it's hard for them to understand what that actually means, but it somehow looks like something they should want to do something about. Yeah, why don't you hand those out so we have that.
And this is the Budget Overview Committee's thing.
It's sort of redlined.
Okay, good.
I like the way they led with a nice picture of our governor.
No, under the heading negatives.
Negatives, though.
He probably saw that and decided not to run again.
He wasn't planning on much support to credit anyway.
So one of the things that's been discussed a lot, maybe we can try to clear up a couple of these numbers. One of the things that's been discussed a lot is the savings that the town is benefiting from in this budget as a result of most, but not all, of the unions moving to the state partnership healthcare plan. So maybe, Roland, you can remind us, because just to point out how you can get confused, at least in meetings that people have with me. You can compare the saving to what we would have paid if we hadn't gone to the state plan. So that would have reflected a 15% increase from the prior year, and then back down to the lower number. It makes the saving look like a bigger number. Or you can just compare what we're expecting to spend next year as compared to what we actually spend in this current year. The view that I happen to like, just because those are both real numbers, we don't have to guess about them. So
Yeah, the healthcare savings are only for well, it does not include public safety, which is an
Neither
addition.
police nor fire nor the
Nor
nurses?
the nurses, right.
Okay.
So some of the confusion in the schedule is they're talking about $13 million in savings. The schedule that they presented compared budget to budget, and it was obviously different. There are $13 million in savings, assumed staying with Cigna, having the normal increases, and then comparing what the state one is. The savings should be about $12 million.
On that basis?
No. On that basis, it is about 13.
Okay.
Budget to budget, it's about 12, of which we have almost 10 million in the current 17-18 budget as presented. So the public safety and the nurses would be an additional $2 million.
And where do we stand with those now? Because at the time we did the budget, those were not, we didn't have
The
those. to
police have
count.
agreed,
The police union has agreed.
and my understanding is the nurses soon will agree. Okay. So that leaves the fire, which is an arbitration,
Okay.
And do we know how much of the 2 million is fire?
about $1 million.
About a half.
Half of that.
So the 12 would become,
The 10 that's
Sorry,
in the budget now would become 12.
would become 12 if everybody came
Yes.
along.
No,
Or-
it'd be 13 if fire came too.
No,
Not budget to budget.
11.
Okay.
yeah.
12. 12 if
That's-
everybody went.
That's what makes this difficult. Um,
Budget to budget, we have almost $10 million in right now of savings.
Right. I think you have to stick with, even though they can do whatever they want to do, I think we should be sticking with the budget we proposed as compared to last year's budget. That number is 10. And if the rest of the remaining 3 unions move along, then during the year, we're going to find a $1 or $2 million benefit over and above that.
And just to make sure I understand, so that's comparing fiscal 17 budget
Yeah.
versus 18 budget.
The budget that we sent to them from the BEP.
Right.
Right? Okay. So now we should talk about what is that, let's just stay with the 10 for a minute. What is that $10 million? Does it include the money for the high deductible plan? What does it,
Well, it compares the high deductible plan that we currently have with state minute and the
Okay.
net cost to the town.
right? Does it include the OPEB saving?
It does on their schedule, I did not, since I was just looking at general fund, which is where our healthcare resides, it doesn't include the OPEB.
Okay. How much is that?
We just got revised numbers on OPEB, and our actuary said it's about $600,000 better, which is already reflected in the budget, though. It's already reflected in our contribution to the OPEB fund.
Right. So the $10 million, the budget we sent them versus this year's budget, that 10 million does not include, or does include that $600,000.
It doesn't, if you want to add the 600 saying that's part of the move to the state in the form of a lower OPEB contribution, then it would be 10.6.
And when we did the budget that we sent to the RTM, did we reduce the OPEB number in that?
It is
Yes.
it is a
By
reduction.
851.
So I'm
Okay.
trying to spell it
Okay.
out here.
Okay.
So it's reflected in the proposed fiscal 18 budget. It's not in that 10 million.
No, it's not.
It's another
another
$600,000. Are there
And-
any,
What,
right,
what line items make up the 10 million? 'Cause I don't get to 10 million when I went through it, so I'm missing something.
I'll have to get that for you. This is their schedule on here, but it would be,
Because I have healthcare.
Healthcare.
There's 5 million.
at the HSA.
Comparing 18 budget as approved it versus 17 budget. Other employee benefits was 3.3 million reduction, so that's 8.3.
HSA deduction, contribution. That's a significant one. It goes from 4 down
Which
to
is in the
5.
other employee benefits, I think. Okay.
So because everything starts with that $10 million, I think it would be helpful if we could have one piece of paper that didn't have anything else on it, that just had 2 columns in it, you know, the current year and the proposed fiscal 18 budget, breaking it out into the items which foot to the 10 million.
Okay.
And then you can say in a note below that if the public safety unions go along, that would generate another 2 million if all of them came along, and so far, we don't know that fire will, and that's 1 million of it.
And could I ask, that's a full year number, right?
Yep.
So we would actually go to that a lesser number, given that would only happen halfway through the year? Or is that-
That's correct.
Right. So the police and the nurses will be there on the 1st of July, right?
Yes.
Fire, I guess could still get there, but probably won't.
It's running out of time.
They're running out of time, so.
They were
so-
supposed to opt in by April 1, I thought I heard earlier, isn't that right?
But they could opt in, and then they could do it because the next quarter, so if they agree, it's not like you would get the savings from part of the
Right.
rolling.
So that $1 million is maybe a whole million if they act instantly, and if they don't, some number between 0 and $1 million.
But to John's point, which I thought was a good point, these figures are not the full 10 million plus the 1 million or 2 million, and also for the 600,000. Those are all annualized figures, of which only half of which applies to our fiscal year 18.
No,
No,
for the
no.
fiscal
No.
18,
July 1.
what's in the budget right now assumes everyone is moving to the state plan July 1 except for public safety. When we put the budget together, we didn't know about the police
Right.
and the nurses.
So they're for full.
So that produces the 10 million
Yes.
plus, so far, another 1 million of savings for fiscal year 18. Okay, thank
Of
you.
which only the 10 million is in the budget that's been
Right,
submitted.
gotcha, right. Right.
So you can see the temptation out there when you're voting on the budget at an RTM meeting. The temptation is to try to find a way to capture those funds and then turn back to us and say, so you don't need as much money, so don't raise taxes as much. Of course, in fact, we can raise taxes by any amount we want. So that's an issue. But the problem they have is they don't actually have a way to capture these amounts.
I guess they could say, well, you have $2 million of healthcare savings, we're just going to reduce the healthcare budget by $2 million.
But we've already reduced it by $2 million.
Not the
No.
budget.
Careful. The budget we sent them has the whole $10 million worth of savings in it.
It does, but it doesn't have public safety savings.
Right, but we also, so they might, well, I mean, they could be bold and take 2 million out, but there's only 1 million that we now know we're going to capture.
They might be bold. If you were an RTM member and you thought it was productive to send a message to the fire department to encourage, or maybe the word is compel, them to join.
Yeah,
You're right, you might just say, we at the town want $1 million. Gentlemen, if you don't join the state partnership plan, we're just going to reduce your effort. That's what we make the paper.
yeah, but how would they do that, Michael?
Take it out of.
No, but he's sitting there. They'd have to take it, they'd have to somehow prorate it across all the various accounts
In fire.
in fire.
Frankly, fire is almost all salaries. There's very little, it's a department that is uniquely high proportion personnel cost, and you start making cuts.
I'm not making their argument. but
Okay.
I think you're just
Yeah.
making it easily. It's one line. You just just told me one line.
Well, you can choose to take it all out of one line.
See, which is
That's-
the kind of thing they did last year. Again, I'm not making
Okay.
an argument, I'm saying it's happening.
No, I understand. I'm trying not to read the minds of the RTM. I'm trying to figure out if there's a mechanism that's reasonable, forget about whether, reasonable in the sense that it wouldn't be impossible to get a vote on it.
This benefit is part of the arbitration, though, is it not? It's one of the items that are on the table in the arbitration. So in the end, you can cut the item, but if there's no agreement and an arbitrator decides,
I don't think it's on the,
well, that's my question.
Well,
It's
we
a
don't know
benefit.
the answer to that, but,
Okay.
yeah, but,
I took you down a path, sorry.
yeah, that's okay. But let me make another point about that. I don't think Alcava wants us, the RTM will do whatever it does, but I don't think he wants us sort of doing something that might be interpreted by a labor person as coercing the fire union. They get to make whatever decision they want to make in their best interest. If the RTM may choose to try to send them a message, but I don't think should be doing that. Beth?
I just wanted to share with you, when I went to District 6, and I apologize, I haven't written this up, but the guy who was speaking on behalf of the VOC was identifying specific areas. He was identifying taking $1 million out of the Board of Ed. He was identifying taking $2 to $3 million out of police and fire. He was identifying taking out the project to redo Greenwich Avenue, the initial
Streetscape.
project, the streetscape.
The capital project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there may have been one or two other, I'm going to go back to
Okay.
my notes.
I didn't
I'll
see
send
any
it
of
to all
that.
you, but it just struck me that they've only started talking amongst themselves.
Sure.
In the VOC of specific areas they think they can go after to come up to 10.
Okay.
So that they're in the process of doing that.
Yeah, there was none of that in any of the meetings that I was at, so
And I don't know why he was so specific, but
Yeah.
he was.
yeah. Okay. The other thing that confused people in the meetings that I was in was that the healthcare savings are described in this handout as a one-time saving, as if, so they've suggested to people, you get to save the money this year, but you won't get to save it next year. But in fact, of course, you just reset the budget to a lower number and then you move on from there. So I tried to clarify that in the meetings I was in. I had mixed success. The expression one-time savings has been used so many times in other contexts, not the least of which are Hartford, where they're fond of finding one-time savings in order to get the budget down for 1 year only, that using that language in this handout has confused people about whether that's
The other point
recurring.
that people should be aware of is the escalation of state partnership plans that's been 67% a year, whereas currently our 6% is about 14 to 15%. So if we look at the trajectory going forward, and not only do we lower the cost structure of the town, but the increases going forward are a delta of about 10% off of, the base. So
Yeah.
not only do we lower the cost structure, but the anticipated increases.
But the analysis is simplistic. It doesn't matter what the base is. Going forward, we want our taxes to increase 0 to 2%, whatever that number is in your head, and a 6 to 7% increase in healthcare is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, we'll come back to the challenge of future incomes. I want to make sure the state partnership actually has numbers in it for how much they can increase the fee for the next 2 years, is that correct? And I've heard different numbers mentioned, 4 to 5, 5 to 7. I don't know.
At the HR committee today, we asked what it was, and apparently they've just gotten the rate, was supposed to be, it's only a 1-year rate. And this is specifically, as far as I know, it's wrong, you get the rate set in April, or effective July.
Yeah, but I thought that okay, but I thought what we were told some time ago was that the contract between the state partnership and whoever its insurer is, do we know who it is?
United,
Oxford?
It's United Healthcare.
specified a range beyond which they couldn't go for the next 2 years.
Let's see about the range. I know it's been running at this 5%. Okay.
Let's find out if in fact the contract has a limit in it, because that's what we were told back when we were negotiating the teacher's contract. Okay. Jill?
Again, not understanding what your statement is. I think the argument was essentially when they said that healthcare is not a repeating savings, was based on the town using the savings to allow it to meet budget guidelines without further reduction in headcount. And I think their argument is essentially only the other efficiencies that can prevent an ongoing escalation. And maybe I'm just, maybe I'm missing what your response is, of course, by lowering the cost per entity, it doesn't build in a higher cost to next year's budget, goes in a lower cost. I don't think that's
No, I'm just,
their argument.
yeah, so they didn't, I'm not looking at an argument, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, at the 5th page, if you count the cover page, the headline is, "Town has benefited from a one-time fiscal 17-18 cost savings." And the meetings I was in uniformly read that to mean that we were saving that money this year, but that savings wouldn't exist in following years. They weren't, so they were saying, well, yeah, we're saving that money this year, but we should have, and this is the expression that was used by the BOC representative, we, the BET, should have made structural changes in the town budget so that when that money came back into the budget the next year, we would have already structurally lowered the cost of operating town government. But in fact, that's not what happens. That's just the confusion that people had, and the confusion arises out of that headline.
The $10 or $12 million savings is the difference between having stayed in Cigna as opposed to going over to the state plan. For the year that follows, going from state plan to state plan, there's not going to be another $10 million drop. You're going to be simply staying at the same lower level. Maybe that's what they mean by the one-time savings.
I don't know what the person who wrote that headline
neither do I.
knew or didn't know,
Okay.
but I know what people were asking me in the meetings. And they were saying, well, what are you going to do next year when you don't have that savings? Well, we do have that savings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, I would draw a little graph and I would say, see, it comes down and then we work off from that base going forward. So,
I think it's the other question.
What are you going to do next year when you don't have that savings to help you balance the budget and meet these budget guidelines? And
Well-
your argument is starting from a lower base, but it's still that less. Anyways, we don't have to, I think we know where the question is.
yeah. Well, that's why I'm just trying to make sure we all have one set of numbers about what's being saved for sure in this coming year and what additional saving might show up, which is not yet reflected in the budget, if the public safety unions come on board, and then we can say, since the budget was submitted, half of that has been secured, but the other half may or may not show up. The phrase that I heard several times, which suggests to me that it's being used, was structural savings. And what they meant by structural savings was headcount reductions. And they were very clear that there was to be no reduction in service levels as a result of achieving these savings. They were very confident that there's just a lot of waste and that they can cut the budget and no service reduction will result from that. So, it's hard to prove a negative, right? So once that notion gets into people's minds, it's a challenge.
Jim, what is the calculation of the 13 million?
There is no 13 million.
12. I know,
And two,
the 13 million comes from the current healthcare premium with an anticipated escalation next year of 15% versus the actual rate for next year in the state plan. So that's how they get the numbers to go further apart. If you go this budget to the next budget, it is $10 million less to the town net. It's actually lower than that, which are the employee contribution. So it's $10 million less. If the remaining organized labor goes in, there is a potential, if they go on July 1, there is a potential for an additional $2 million savings. That, all you need to do when you go to the meeting is say, when we did the budget, we accounted for the 10, we reset the base in future budget thinking that that might go up 5% a year, going from the new base. And that we didn't do anything with public safety because number one, they hadn't agreed to it. Number two, we're not even sure when the fire department can or will go into zero arbitration. That's it with healthcare. If they want to come back and say, well, you should have reduced your healthcare costs by an additional $2 million to represent that, yet there's no answer that they want to hear why you would. The answer is, at the time we made the budget, we made plans for next year in a continued down economy and getting ready for any things that might come our way.
But the allocation here is 13 million, so I mean, we have to
We've
take
corrected
that
that
out.
on page 2. You see that red line? Correct that.
Why is the reduction for police and nurses going in only $1 million and fire is another $1 million when the police are, I don't know, 145 and the nurses are, what, a dozen, but the fire is only 100 people? Why is there the premium for 100 fire only about the same as the premium reduction for
I have to
100?
go back and look at the calculations, and those
Yeah,
are.
just rough
The
numbers.
two groups together are $2 million.
Uh-huh.
I have to go back and see exactly,
How it divides.
right.
Okay. So if I count the pages again, including the cover page, 1, 2, 3, 4, on the fourth page,
Devastating cuts.
devastating cuts and new pension costs. So the are these ECS and special ed numbers in fact what we thought? Let me try it. Are those the numbers that we were scheduled to receive this year?
Those are,
I think so.
those were budget figures, aren't those budget figures from last year before the mid-year cuts compared to the
Right.
zero that we're budgeting now?
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out.
So they're close to it. The ECS reduction is actually 3.0. It's 3.038, so they have a little rounding error. Special ed is 1.5.
Yeah.
From
No,
budget,
they're using the asterisk in the lower right. They're using the special education five-year average. The lower right, the 1,204,298 has an asterisk, and it says amount, whatever that word is, renex? I don't know what that word is, the five-year average.
So where are you reading?
Probably reflects.
The lower right,
Oh, renex.
you see the
Yeah.
matrix there?
Yeah.
You see the asterisk next to special education?
Yes.
See to the right, the 1,204?
Mhm.
That's where the 1.2 is coming from.
okay.
A million.
But our budget, our 17 budget was 1.5 million.
Right.
So the 1,204 reflects our actual receipts, correct?
So it was 3 point,
No.
the budget for fiscal year 17, Leslie, was 3 million for ECS and 1.5 for special ed?
Yes.
Again, what I'm trying to end up with here tonight is a piece of paper that Roland sends us that says, here's what it was in fiscal 16, or excuse me, fiscal 17, the year we're in now. And here's what we put in the budget for fiscal 18.
Zero, right?
We put zero
The message
in.
you want to convey is that all anticipated revenues have been marked on zero.
No, municipal revenue sharing, we kept at 200,000. Close to zero.
we're confused, right? So imagine how confused the RTM is. And what I want us to have when we go out to the meetings is a couple of pieces of paper that have the budget they approved for fiscal 17 in one column and the budget we proposed for fiscal 18 in another. Because what they've done here is sort of pulled numbers, sometimes numbers that are similar but not the same, sometimes numbers that are dissimilar. And I'm not suggesting they were doing this I'm not trying to figure out what their motivation was. I'm not suggesting they were trying to confuse people. But the numbers that they have in here, some of them, maybe many of them, can't be compared the way they've compared them. So that statement says devastating cuts, new pension costs. That's the headline. And the stuff on the left is close to what the cut in the state aid was, though you would say the special ed number was more like $1.5 million, did you say?
From budget to budget.
Budget to budget, yeah. The pension cost number is, in my view, not worth the paper it's printed on. It's a calculation that the governor in some way articulated in his February 8th speech, and CCM reflected back to us as sort of a $10 million cost, but oh, by the way, you were going to get a couple $1 million of savings by taxing the local hospital. First off, none of that may happen. If some of it happens, we have to be prepared to deal with it. I think what we did when we put the budget together at the budget committee level, and then as it was approved at the full BET, was we gave ourselves some room to deal with that. If they want to take millions of dollars out of the budget, depending on how they do it, we may lose the ability to do that. What we will surely have the following year is much larger increases in the mill rate. Or staff reductions, and there'll be no telling, right. Their answer might well be, well, that's okay, just come back to the RTM with an interim budget, which would be sort of like being Hartford, we could be doing budgets all the time.
They only raise taxes once.
Yeah, that's right, however, we can't tax anymore, so that would just be drawing more money out of reserves, right? So the next page is page 5, and this says in the first bullet, this is the page that starts with the headline, the one-time savings. State plan allows town to save 13+ million in one fiscal year, and Roland says, well, that doesn't agree to the 9.6 million in the column right below that. So when somebody says, where's the 13 million come from, it's a little hard to tell just because it doesn't foot to the other numbers that are on this page. But on this page, they did identify the healthcare premium, the OPEB savings, the HSA contribution, and the healthcare admin costs. So at least they've broken out the bits and pieces. And that number, I guess, Roland, is pretty close.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, that 9,576,000 is pretty close to right. The 13 million is, they put other stuff in there.
Well-
9,576 is good number.
That number is right as presented. And they're presenting it the way I would want to present it, comparing the two budgets, budget to budget.
I mean, it's possible, just to beat the dead horse, that their 13 million is extrapolating for all employees moving over.
But
It
then-
gets closer if it's 2 million.
It's two pieces.
It's a trend, it's from
It-
trend.
it
and you
is-
captured that.
Yeah.
Right, but it's also.
It assumes that
the
everybody
budget,
moves over,
right.
but it also compares 17-18
It's a
budget
payment.
to what we would have been had we all stayed in Cigna, which
With a
Alice was another-
14% increase in
another
premium.
increase.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yep.
so that's really a critical point.
Yeah.
It includes the Cigna increase. Okay.
It.
For the
it-
healthcare, if we had stayed in that plan.
As if we had just, it
Right.
says, here's what we
Right.
would have been paying if we'd
Right.
stayed in the plan, yeah. Which is a very strange comparison.
The 13
This
million. we're
13 million number that they have in the first bullet here, it, on one end, it assumes that nobody goes to the state plan and we get the proposed Cigna increases. And it compares that number to the actual budget amount in the current year. That's one number that, now that people are changing plans, will never, ever occur. So, then on the next page, they make the point that they don't know when Hartford is going to vote, and that's correct. Which somehow then leads them to the notion that they should take more money out of the town's budget rather than leaving the town some oxygen. And then they have this summary.
I think there's a typo on page 7. Second line,
Which you calling page 7, what's the top of it?
2017.
Sorry,
What page you going?
the one that
No, I-
says,
Summary of the general.
Oh, okay, gotcha, yeah.
If you look at the second bullet, if you look at the red section,
That's just-
the second line.
Roll caption.
Okay, so I suspect that's 2016 to 17.
2016, 17.
Yep.
no, I see. Yeah, I'm not sure we should continue to breathe life into this particular document by producing a red line version.
But we're going to have to counter
I think we need to create
It's going to be
talking
revised and
points.
reissued.
And we'll see that the night before, maybe.
Are you intending to share these red edits?
Well,
You're going to share these red edits
Mike-
with the
Mike-
BOC, right?
well, let's decide what we want to do. This was only prepared for the purpose of this meeting,
Oh, it's fine.
okay? And you've already met with the Finance Committee and the
Pete
BOC?
and I met with Lucia and Dan and basically went over these issues and said, these things are wrong, or they're misleading, so they haven't seen everything here, but they have seen most of them, and they understand pretty much everything that's in here.
Which will prompt them to do nothing.
And you also met with the Finance Committee?
Yes.
Okay. So here,
I'm sorry, could I just ask, the met with Finance Committee, was there a result from?
yeah, we're going to talk about that. So on the page that starts out, summary of the general fund FY 17-18, the first bullet, Roland has inserted that this is a reduction of $8.8 million from the 16-17 budget. That is a point, of course, that they never, ever make. Yeah. You could just as easily say, yes, we're saving $10 million in healthcare costs in the fiscal 18 budget, and oh, by the way, we reduced the operating budget by $9 million. Then they do this thing where they compare the $47,847,000 capital budget and call it an increase of $4,239,000 from the first selectman's budget. So those two numbers aren't the same number, right?
No, they're not.
So the 47,847 is the amount that we proposed in the fiscal 18 budget for the capital tax levy.
Yes, that's a tax levy number.
Okay, so that's the tax levy we proposed, which is up 3 million from the year before, not 4,239,000. The 4,239,000 is the appropriation increase that we put in over what the first selectman ask for as a capital appropriation.
And half of that is that new lab wash.
And half of it is, that's right. Half of it is the money that
Really just Western.
we're taking out of New Lebanon school project because they're not putting the modulars in. And then we're putting it back so that they can secure the site where the construction's going to happen. Now, somebody will say, it can't possibly, one guy said it couldn't cost more than $150,000 to secure the site. So he thinks giving them $2 million is just inviting them to waste $1,850,000. So that's an argument.
No, by the way, I'm on the building committee, so the answer to that one is, would it cost X to demolish the old building and in its place build parking, entryway, and playgrounds? Would it cost X if you could, in the old scheme, when you had 14 months to do it, because you did it simultaneously with the construction, because the kids were in modulars at Western. Now that you have to keep the kids in this school, instead of having 14 months, like a summer and a school year, to tear it down and rebuild, you have 2 months. So when you accelerate the tear down, the new bridges, because the entry's there, and the parking, the playgrounds, from 14 months to 2 months, it costs $1.3 million more. So that's what's going on. It's not 150,000, that they should understand, it's not just 150,000 to put up fences and security. It's because you're compressing all that work from 14 months to 2. So that has real cost.
I would tell everybody to do the easier route. We filed an application with the state for reimbursement specific to a state law on reimbursement for 100% of the project, $37 million. We're doing an accounting measure, which they actually have always asked us to do, not transfer across capital projects. So we're doing that to maintain that $37 million. The state doesn't care if we appropriate the $37 million 10 ways. They just want to know that the part of the agreement that there's appropriation for $37 million. We're maintaining that. What I would say, this is going to trigger the next conversation about delay of getting the state budget approved. What I say is the conversation is, if you would like to reduce the appropriation by this, first of all, we don't have to lapse the other one. That will bring another conversation. What I would say to them is, if you do that, you now have theoretically reduced your 80 of 80% by that $2 million. So, that's your choice. We're being as transparent as possible. And quite frankly, we've honored everything you've asked us to do so far. So that's how I plan on approaching it. That was not such a big problem because I've got email traffic from Lucia and Dan, Mike Warner, Josh Brown, committee chairs, the moderator, on what we were doing, and a set of emails back to me saying, we understand, gotcha, that's fine.
Was that before or after this document appeared?
No, I don't think they're focusing on that in here. I think they're just trying to take the grand numbers. No, they're not mentioning 11 here, but that's where that 4.2 comes from.
So if they knew it, then they knew they were being purposefully misleading.
Yes.
If they didn't know it,
Right.
then now they know it, so that'll change
And that's what I would
that.
say to Lucia and Dan. I would say, that 4.2 number, you were part of the discussion with us on that one class appropriation being carried over. So that 4.2 is really $2 million for Western.
Does the reimbursement from the state, when it was modulars at Western, were there reimbursements that we were entitled to on those dollars? And when it now becomes a revised construction, the condensed construction plan, as Bill was very, very correctly describing to us, is the reimbursement get handled in the same way? They're both eligible in the same ways, they're not subject to different limits?
Same qualification.
Okay, thank you.
The headline on the capital budget is not that the tax levy went up $3 million, because it goes up $3 million every year. The headline is that the capital request dropped by $29,996,000. And that wasn't just a one-time event, because the first selectman and the town administrator have now put together a longer-term capital plan which never rises to as high as $50 million.
You're right, really, the correction there is plus, it goes down by 29.9 because you left. Right, last year you appropriated in the budget 30 plus million for the rest. So that
Went from 70 some odd to 40 some odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking at. No, this.
But it's also a change in policy out of the first selectman's office on how much he wants to spend on capital projects, at least for the foreseeable future. And that's to go to their favorite phrase, that's a structural change. That's something that the first selectman has proposed to change. The BET went along with that, and it's reflected in this budget. Then we come to the $215 million of outstanding debt. Given that the outstanding debt number is a moving figure, I have no idea what that number is.
It's from the budget book.
I'm still on that same page, the summary.
Right.
So tell us what you think that $215 million is, if you know.
We took the CAFR outstanding balance as of the end of 2016. We incorporated the changes that we made this past January.
Okay.
From that, we said this is what we're going to bond next year. And then we made an assumption based upon borrowings in the 17-18 budget, how much we would have bands for at the end of the fiscal year.
So you're saying that you take this as being a reasonably correct statement of what the outstanding
I
debt
think that's
is
what it'll be
as
at
of
the
right
end
now?
What it will be at the end of 18.
At the end of 18?
On June 30th of 18.
Yes, this number is from the funding schedule that's in the capital section.
And what was that number at the end? What's that number going to be at the end of 17?
I think it was 213.
It was close to this number.
17, 16 was, I don't have it, I forgot it. It was,
Yeah, so I'm going someplace with that, and that is, my recollection is, but I'm not sure I'm right, so you need to give us these numbers, is I think the end of 16, the end of June 30th of 17, and June 30th of 18 are all within $1 million or $2 million of each other, that there's no big trend to rapidly increasing debt the way the numbers have actually played out as opposed to our own forecasts a couple years ago. Yeah, but there's a headline in another part of this document where they say that liabilities are rising and debt is rising and,
That's on OPEB.
yeah. But the outstanding, part of my, if I have an objection to the way they presented things, it's that they don't create any context for people. So the spending, operating spending is $421 million. Oh, that's $9 million less than the prior year. The outstanding debt is $215 million. Oh, that's $1 million or $2 million more than it was the last 2 years. They're sort of raising bad things that could happen and not giving the budget as presented to the RTM credit for the good things that have happened and are actually happening and are under our control, not under Hartford's control. And then well, that's okay, but I know. The last bullet on that page just says that as presented, the budget would raise the mill rate by 1.99%, but then they tie that to the capital tax levy, and of course, the capital tax levy is less than half of that increase if they looked at it that way. Then in the next page, they basically say the BET asked departments to put together plans for reducing costs, and they didn't do that, to which the first selectman and town administrator's response was, we introduced the Lean Six Sigma program, and that produced headcount reductions and improved operations. We're going to continue that, and we put $25,000 in the budget to provide for the costs of continuing that program. So then on the next page, they say all we did was increase taxes. I don't think that's our view, and Roland, I guess here you've named some other things that happened in the numbers.
That page is probably the most important page.
That'll be at the top of the one pager that we're going to use.
Yeah, if I had to think about headlines, I would talk about the reduction in the operating budget and the reduction in the use of fund balance and the reduction in allocations for capital projects. You know, all of those things are good things that have happened, and while they happened and immediately benefit the taxpayer with lower mill rate increases, we're also giving ourselves room to maneuver if the state hits us with more unplanned events. One of the things that we don't say in here, and I don't know that maybe it's too confusing a point, but in both of the last 2 years, the state encouraged us to budget for ECS and special ed at a level which they then didn't actually send us. So on top of everything else, we've absorbed those shortfalls in revenue that we had hoped to get from the state. And those aren't insignificant numbers. They're millions of dollars. So it may be worth making sure that everybody knows those numbers.
Last bullet here, reduced borrowings, just to be precise. What's this backup behind that bullet?
Where are you?
Last bullet that says reduced borrowings which will result in lower debt service debt level in future years.
So total capital,
If you look at our projections in the last 2 budgets, we anticipated, matter of fact, Bill Grace and Nancy Weiss worked on it, that showed us getting our debt levels as high as 2 more years, into almost $250 million. Because we backed off on the capital, our debt is remaining in the 2 teens, well, it's not right now. And if you look at even the projection for next year, which we can't really make that decision, it's all based on projections, we still don't look like our annual debt repayment is almost equal to what we plan on borrowing. So we're keeping that debt level from growing. And in a time where we're being accused of a growing budget, that's something that is pretty fine.
and our debt policy is 240, isn't it? Do I remember that correctly? 240?
And when we adopted that debt policy, we had thoughts that we might not be able to make 2 years under that 240.
Joe?
I think, when you're doing the one pager, and if we're going to use these bullet points as our story, let's say, that it would be useful to have an introduction of the context that the DOT over the last few years, this year included, has taken, has been a prudent financial planner to address shortfalls in the state budget, but also to reduce our ongoing costs, and then list out so that when people are introduced
goes through us.
Then Randy, they don't have any recognition
They don't.
of what he was doing behind the scenes.
No, I think there's just a fundamental different way of viewing town government, and they believe that more of the operating budget can be reduced than it has been. And they're just going at it in a different way.
It's speculation and supported projections and worst case scenario. And then they put together, 9, 12 pages, but they can't support any of it. It's all projections.
You've forgotten your list, the word fabrications, too.
Well, all right.
Well, remember that their September memo had a much different kind of budget guideline than this board approves. But that's before the state's issue and fiscal problems in the budget came to light. So they took a much more, hawkish view over what the level of town spending should be, period. And now they're throwing in this context to try to underscore their perspective.
We made their budget guidelines. It's here, we're very close.
Yeah.
Their budget guidelines have been modified by everything happening in the state. I believe there's a general outcry to use all of the things that the state has done legitimately, which is reacting to. We have to make sure that gets complete. But I think they're looking at this as this is the time now. Instead of resetting healthcare, let's reset everything. And
Yeah.
let's just start with, one of my things that I'll hold back from saying is they're accusing us in this document of not following our guidelines. If the shoe fits, that's exactly,
They don't read that.
Yeah, they would have said, the 1.5 increase, including healthcare, was their guidelines, but they wouldn't have included the new healthcare plan. They would have included the cost of the old healthcare plan. So they want to take that $10 million down to the bottom line, out of costs, which we haven't really done. We funded those 10, we've taken the 10 million and we've used it.
If you listen to the RTM, they're sitting here worried about this deal with the state. They don't think they're going to get the money, and then, quite frankly, they're afraid. They've done it with questioning our subject to release. They're afraid if the state reneges on the deal, it says we're only going to be 30%. We're not going to give you anything. They're afraid we're going to release that money and go for the school. They believe that. The next thing they're going to work on is if the state doesn't approve the budget until July, August, or September, that's going to push the construction out. What is that going to cost?
That's already happened like with Lloyd.
I get it.
Eliza,
Well, they're going to wrestle over this budget. And that's what they're just trying to take advantage of. From their guidelines, you saw me point out to them, are you sure this is what you want? You want to be able to get 1.5 in the department budget, offset healthcare? The idea is, the reason that I think you see this document here, this document, look at what we're doing. Can you imagine the RTM numbers that have this under desk saying,
Well, I think what we should expect, though, next Tuesday night, they're going to try to identify line items to get to that objective, which then puts the onus on the first selectman, on us, to say, okay, what does that really mean? Let's take out $10 million, or whatever the number is, in the departments that you're identifying. Here's what would happen, and to try and get that information out in advance of an RTM vote. That's going to be pretty challenging, but that's the only way to combat it, is to make it real. What do we think is going to happen by any proposed changes?
That opportunity.
Well, I'm not saying that, I'm not promoting the idea, though they were listening. But I think that that's what they did last year, and I think we should expect that it will happen again. And that's a conversation they're allowed to have, we're all allowed to have, but you want to get as good information as you can out there.
They're taking advantage of the state, and you'll see in the next page, if you follow it through logically, we've got labor settlements next year that are going to be X
Yeah.
higher than this year.
The
How are we going to handle that?
the GEA contract.
There you go. So and the answer to that is, and by the way, I give Dan a lot of credit. Dan's done the math. Dan said it in the finance committee. You typically raise the mill rate every year a couple %, and the grant list goes up about 6% offset the natural labor increases. Did you say that? Jim, you heard him say that.
Right.
And he's right. He's absolutely right. And what he's saying, though, is I don't want to continue to do that.
Right.
I don't want to continue that on that plan, which then leads us to the position where, okay, what plan would you like to do? Would you like to cut services right now, and then the state doesn't do anything, and then, or nobody's come out with, for those of you who were on the BET when 2008 happened, it took us 3 years and 8 months to break even just on the layoffs and the early retirement program. You put healthcare, unemployment, and the payouts for sick and accumulated vacation, all the other stuff.
But I think that's a conversation that will be started next week, because I do think that's where they're going.
But we can only go there and say, this was our plan, if you don't like our plan.
Well, they're going to come up with money cuts. They're not going to say how to do it. They want to cut that money. They're going to take that money.
You're on the microphone. They're talking.
He still wants to cut. He doesn't want to sustain the.
I think it wants to cut town services.
Yeah, we have a budgetary process that's been in Greenwich now for more than 15 years that has substantial reserves in it so that we have room to respond to surprises like not getting the money from the state the last 2 years that we expected to get. We have labor negotiations which keep our labor costs in a reasonable range and which did a great job this year of working with the unions to get them to see that adopting the state plan was not just good for the town, it was good for the members of the union and has produced substantial savings. And we have protected that process and improved on it over time. An example of the improvement is the replanning of the capital program this last year so that instead of sort of running up over 50 million a year in capital allocations, we're talking about numbers down in the low 40s. That system has allowed us to absorb the result of the recession, which took more than $100 million away from us in our pension plans, and we're gradually replacing that. It's serving us very well, but what it is, and by the way, no small point, it gives us the lowest mill rate in the state. But if people still aren't satisfied with that, and they can convince their elected body, the RTM, decides to cut the town budget by, in part, using up the reserves, because that's what will happen here, is the reserves will get used. They have the power to do that, and our job is to make the argument that the current system serves us well, that they've got some numbers here that aren't right, and we need to correct these numbers, that they're not giving the town department heads and the administrators and the first selectmen credit for the savings that they created this year alone. They're saying, we don't trust you to stick to the agreement that if we don't get the money from the state, the new Lebanon school will not go forward until there's been a whole nother process and another vote of the full RTM, because that was the only way we could get the thing to go forward to get the state application. But now they're saying, well, we're afraid that you, BET, will renege on that deal. All we can do is say to them, do we have a long history of lying to you about the numbers? I don't think so. Have we often told you we would do one thing and then done something quite different? I don't think so. And we'll see how they vote. We can't fix that, but we can try to be clearer about what the budget contains, because we know what things they've confused. We can try to be clearer about what the headlines are. We can try to be clearer about the benefits that we've gotten over the last 15 years from the process that we use. In the end, they get to vote. That's how the process works. And so, I'd like to have lower taxes too, but I have the lowest taxes in the state. So, and I'm getting a lot of service for those taxes. If they want lower taxes still, they can push the town in that direction, whether that will improve property values, improve the quality of the school system, maintain the physical infrastructure. Those are different questions. But if they don't think those questions are important, that somehow we're wasting money here, we'll see how the vote goes. Sorry, Nancy.
No, I was just going to say your point, you were saying if they were to make cuts to certain, the inventory of the state, they would lower the reserves, but to a certain extent, you can even out some of that surplus by this year's budget, and then last year, there was some embedded surplus in all the operating departments. You can make the argument this year, if they pose a similar across-the-board cut, that you're actually going to have to really make some substantive changes in what we're offering in services, because there's a little less that we're called surplus there. Last year, they embedded in all of the departments with some surplus. This year, in order to come in at a 2% increase, the departments that can sort of reduce their operating budgets closer to actual.
Yeah.
Some of that money out of there.
Yeah, well, that's,
Necessarily just going to be reducing the reserve as much as there will be some service reductions.
yeah, well, that's a good point. We've, for this 15-year period, we've always produced budgets that resulted in substantial unspent funds being returned to the general fund. The more you change that policy to a policy of, no, we're going to give you a little less than you actually need, but you don't have to return anything to us, they won't return anything. They'll return to where they were in the 90s when they spent every nickel.
I don't think we want to change that because how we do it, I don't think we want to let them know.
Well, first off, that's never been a secret. They see the money.
Not that many people know that. Yeah. I think all the comments that you made are very useful and accurate. And I think the corrections to this are useful. I think we should share that with them if we haven't already.
Pete and I went through the whole document with them, pretty much.
Right, so they're aware.
They're absolutely aware of this.
That's great. The conclusion that I draw, we don't want, there's 11 of us here, we don't want to get off, we don't want to be in the position of, we've done this, we've done it right. How dare you criticize it, you're all wet. That is not.
Right, but that's not what we're saying.
That's not appropriate. But I think the conclusion is, we did a good job. This was a well-constructed budget with the help of Peter and Roland. It's a good product. I think what you're hearing is, and this is different than 5 years ago, you're hearing the citizens of Greenwich acting through their 230 representatives in actual votes saying, I want to put my thumb on the scale for a little less spending in taxes.
Well, we don't know that's what they're saying yet. We won't know that till May.
Why? And I'm saying, I think through the BOC's work last year, and what got done and voted, and what they're driving towards here, to me, that's my observation. I think you're hearing the thumb on the scale for just slowing the flywheel. I don't think that's bad, and I don't think it's improper work. We can all discuss it, but for me, that's what I think we're hearing. Don't you think that's what we're hearing?
I think we have,
What?
yeah, yeah, we slowed it
I agree, and this is
Yeah,
this flywheel has slowed, but I think they want to keep the thumb on the flywheel.
Yeah,
And I
well,
don't think that's inappropriate.
I
You?
do, yeah, I do. Jill?
I would agree with you, but for the caveat that I think you're saying, we want lower taxes just think it's that extra clause that not everybody will attest to, but I think that it is definitely a presumption held by a number of people, and I think that's, and then it all goes into framing. I think, Dave pointed out some facts, we can agree with some of them, and some of them we think requires the additional context of what we're trying to do, and then how that goes. The assumption that our managers are doing a good job controlling their
Yeah, I think John's point is the one we shouldn't be losing sight of here, which is why I don't agree with where you end up given where you start. You start saying they're unhappy. I agree with that. But you end up with suggesting that we haven't done anything. And we've done lots of things. Absorbed money that we thought we were going to get and didn't get, improved the returns on the investments that we have, cut the operating costs by substantial amounts, negotiated better labor contracts, reduced our capital spending plan. All of these things add up to probably $20 million a year for the last couple of years. And they don't reflect any of that in this, and I think this is a true reflection of what they think. So to some extent, we're not doing a good enough job explaining what we're doing here. But some of this is, what I think of as Paul Ryan doing the budget. A guy who puts a budget together, comes down to the number he wants, and can't fill in the lines in between, so we don't have any idea of how we would ever achieve those results. You can't, in the end, you pass a budget that has no mill rate increase or a negative mill rate change, unless we get very lucky, we're going to be in a lot of trouble the next year. During the current year, if the state hits us with a $10 million charge that we don't have in here, we'll be in trouble. But in the next year, when the labor union contracts with their building increases that these same RTM members voted for come home to roost, there'll be no place to get the money except to have a much larger increase in the mill rate or a substantial reduction in services. And the services you have to reduce are teachers, public works personnel, parks personnel, firefighters, and policemen. That's where the money is. So I said in one of the meetings I was in, well, if you want to save money in the fire department, close the old Greenwich Firehouse and operate completely out of Coscob. Close the Byram Firehouse and operate completely out of Glenville. And put some extra people in those two firehouses so you can roll an extra vehicle out of each of them and save the money. I said, do you want that change in fire service? And the BOC member who was there said, yeah, that'll be fine. Well, actually, we have no idea how that would be because nobody's done a study of that. Nobody's looked at the impact on response times. So they're right on the edge of, in effect, forcing those kinds of changes with no analysis of what impact it's likely to have down the road. We'll see how it plays out. So I think we need our own little handout, probably fewer pages. And we ought to be able to produce that at least in draft form now. We could do what, Michael, you suggested. We could produce a version that's in effect just a response to this, and then something else after we see what the BOC and the finance committees come up with in the next week. So we could have two things, a response to this and then an argument for the budget as configured. I don't know. Do you have a preference?
My thought was, we know a lot of people see this.
Yeah.
Whether it gets edited, revised or not our control. My thought was, the reason it doesn't red line is to be able to say, let's just send this out and say, look, we got this document. I actually saw it for the first time at the Finance Committee. And I would say, look, we got this document. Just please take a note at some of the red highlights and some quick research. Here's some things I think you need to reconsider in this document. You don't think the budget, I don't think the budget overview committee members are gonna go out and say, oh, we have been rolling after we produce this document, and oh, by the way, here's some real correction. So,
Anyway, you can make a phone call and find the answer.
I think the
I think the
idea
answer is
is,
yes.
this document, I mean, even if you go through the rest of the pages, I mean, there's some very good, the sewer is very interesting. And then when you look at the debt pension OPEB liability, there's just one sentence really quick. This is a great document, but we didn't take into consideration that we had the $17 to $20 million pay-as-you-go run out. There's another one here on the pension, where, you know, there's a few notes that say, hey, you know, we didn't change the assumed rate of return, their recommendation as much as anybody's, and that makes the hill look bigger. You know what I mean? That was my thought with this document here.
I think it's okay to do that, but I think you still want to craft the story that we want to tell separately, not just go off the story that they've told.
I think they're going to change this, and I think they should, and this is their duty. You know, if we circulate to 230 people a red line and everything, that's just going to throw gas in the We should tell our story. Jim was driving at it with the columns and figures. There's a few things we can say. I'm happy to make a contribution. We should tell our story. It's a good story, all the reserves, all these points. What we've done is choose a middle ground on using tax levy, a middle ground on using fund balance, a middle ground on mill rates. It's a very responsible budget. And I agree with Leslie, we should tell that story. We should not be responsible for sending around a 230-person red line. This isn't third grade.
It also makes this document frames the issue. It all wraps around this document, which I don't want to.
Yeah, they need to see those changes.
Well, they did, they said, with these gentlemen, they got it.
But they need to, they should.
Who's they?
Lucia and Dan ought to see your final changes, to show the accurate.
Don't worry about the safety, don't worry about circulation of this document.
No, and I believe they're going to make a new version. I can get an answer to that
Well, they-
in 4 hours, okay?
They- they-
Get an answer.
They said they would. The question was when. I mean, one of the points is this has been out there for 2.5 weeks now, and
Right.
nobody's seen anything other than BET did nothing after Malloy came out with his budget.
Still, if they're going to fix it, I wouldn't. Again,
Well,
my
that was
recommendation
the
is let's
conversation
get in
we
their
had.
process, anticipate their own deadlines, edit their document, and send it out. I don't think that's going to lead to cooperation.
Well,
You have
if-
a good story to tell, let's tell our story. It's a good budget.
You can do both. You can do both.
We have an estimated fund balance. I mean, that's sort of addressing what happens to folks
Yeah,
that
that's a very good
get
point.
with a, major, unanticipated or.
Well, so, we know, but nobody else who sees the fund balance will know, that those numbers are designed to take care of remediation at the high school and so on and so forth.
We need to include that in our stories.
Aye.
Yeah, roll
Story
those
gets
numbers,
longer and
that
longer,
page
so-
of fund balance is very.
But I think even
It's-
things
it
like
makes
fund
it-
balance, the words are difficult. People don't understand it. So when I talked to District 12, I said, well, the way I look at it, it's like working capital. If you're in the private sector, the words you'd be using is working capital. And so I think some of this is even terminology, helping people to understand, helping, people understand in more simple words, the kind of government, words that we use here. I think that's part of it, and making the story simpler. Actually, I like this financial information because that we have and that we've had before. And if you use that as your guidance, as Beth and I did in legislative and rules and I did in District 12, it pretty much stays, the script of the story stays there because it tells itself. But
Clarify something.
Sure.
If the fund balance comes down, does that impact the ability to bond in January? Do the rating agencies look to the amount of our fund balance as a part of their criteria?
They do. We had no fund balance for years to speak of, but we weren't bonding. When we started to want to bond, the rating agencies said, well, you don't have any fund balance. You must be in desperate shape. And we said, no, we're not. So I wasn't here, but some of you were. You build up the fund balance in part to give the rating agencies the comfort they're used to. So, yeah. Well, that's,
Let's be clear, though, the $3 million delta that we're talking about is so de minimis to the, when we talk about last year, we used 14 million of fund balance, we used $1 million. This year it's 11, so the difference is 3. You're both right, but that 3, relative to our debt capacity of billions, is so small it doesn't matter. We're going to be triple A, we're going to borrow. You're right, but the numbers are too big.
No, but I will add here, Bill, that in the rating agency meetings, Pete and the others did talk about, they want less use of the fund balance because we've been keeping in a range of 5 to 10%, and basically the other AAAs are in the 10 to 20. So we were headed in the wrong direction. So I do think it's important, but then, when you go to the private sector, really what you're talking is 18 to 30 some odd days of fund balance, increasing that, how much working capital, days of working capital do you need? And I think that is the confusion that's out there because the rating agencies are now looking at governments similarly as they did to, more recently, the 501c3s raising money in the capital markets and obviously previously the private sector. So I think it's those words and the fund balance, the direction of the use of fund balance is important.
yeah. One of the problems with getting into the fund balance conversation is the fund balance is a big number. And it's a big number partly because we use it as working capital and partly because we have money sitting there to deal with things like remediation that we haven't gotten to yet. But the total cash in the bank account is a bigger number than that, which is where the rest of the working capital is. And while people hear these numbers, they don't absorb them. When they do absorb them, their reaction is, well, if you have that much money, then taking $5-10 million out of it won't make any difference. Well, it's the first 5 or 10 million probably won't make any difference. But the next 5 or 10 and the next 5 or 10 get you down to the point where now you have no flexibility. That's the problem the state's gotten itself into.
So what's our next step?
Could you do an analysis of fund balance? Do we get figures?
I'm sorry?
Can you send us something that gives us a quantification of fund balance?
Well, here's
Well,
that.
last month, didn't you? Didn't you send it? You want the fund balance at June 30th of this year?
Yeah.
Roland always makes that good-looking schedule.
It's June 30th, just the,
Yeah, we could
June
send-
30th, upcoming, you're saying, an estimate of where we're going to be
Yep.
at the end of the current fiscal year.
Yep.
If you could do that, if you could share that with us, just to give us a figure.
Right, but if you're going to do that, then, because I find it very hard to operate without context, you have those numbers for the prior year, so I think it's useful for people to see, here's what fund balance was at the end of last year, here's what we think it'll be at the end of this year.
That'd be great.
So we have some context in which to operate.
I have that document,
Yeah.
which is, it has 2 years ago and last year.
It's in your
So I just
slideshow.
wipe out 2 years ago. and
Well, I'll tell you what, leave
put
2 years
1
ago.
year 2 years ago.
Leave it there and give us one more year, so you have
Well,
3 years.
I'll just add it on, and then we'll
Yeah.
have 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That'd
think
be
that's
great.
right.
Thank you.
And it'll be all 3 components.
That'd be great.
It'll be the risk fund and
Yeah,
the,
yes, exactly, because if it shows the
Capital.
components, it shows where the money
Yeah.
is.
So I'm hearing Michael say that he wants to issue the red line. I'm hearing you say you think that's a bad thing to do. And you said something that I was surprised to hear. You think you can find out if the BOC is actually going to issue an update. And if so, we would want to know when. I don't want to be updating their documents if I don't have to, but I can't just hope they update it.
I'm reluctant to make their document the syllabus of the conversations.
Yeah, that's the other problem here.
Can it be a backup to our talking points, but then it gets long?
Why wouldn't a 4-page response establish our point of view and where we are, what we believe?
Yeah, well, there I'm sort of where he is. I'd rather write 4 or 5 pages of bullet points that tell the story the way we think the story ought to be told, instead of responding to the strange way they put it together. Same way what?
At the same time, you are challenging this.
Yeah, well, inevitably, we're challenging that, but, so, who's going to do all this? So, you've redlined this handout, so we have this material. What I think, Michael, in the end, you know, you're sort of the interface to the RTM. You have to decide what you think we should do about this, as opposed to the other subject, which is what's the story we want to remind people of about the budget. Less spending, less capital allocation, lower mill rates, savings, process, whatever we want to say.
I'm undecided unless you hear, unless you can show the 200 and some people that have that document, the same document that says, hey, wait a minute, you ought to take a look at this comparison. If you send them a new document, it's a new document. It doesn't take care of the old document. That was my concern all along. I don't believe they're going to revise it. I don't believe they're going to say to the 200 RTM members, well, that first document we put out had inaccurate information, we revised it. You believe they're going to do that?
Why don't we take
When
a
I-
crack at talking points? And I'll volunteer to do a draft, and you tell me who you want to circulate it to, if you want a small group working on it, and see if the talking points, depending on how long we make it, rebuts the key problems in that data. Then maybe the talking point is enough. The problem is with the 230-person body, some people are going to focus on that budget overview attachment, and some aren't. So how do you reach them all? And you
Can't help
can't.
the people who are working with stale documents, but you see, I agree with your point. I think to make our talking points is what we're about. And I also think they're going to change this.
Yeah, and the other problem with allowing yourself to use this as a syllabus is the problem isn't just what they've said, which is wrong or misleading. They've also cherry-picked the points that they want to discuss. And if you allow this to become the syllabus, then their cherry pick becomes the syllabus, and that you can't rebut without writing something huge. I think you're much better off to do the talking points. You can be looking at the things in this that you want to speak to when you're planning the talking points, but I think you need to speak with your own voice in your own
If I
document.
were Dan and Lucia, I think there's two ways we 11 can deal with them. One is to say, these are our considered, thought through reactions to your document. We recommend that you change it. I think that's treating them with more respect. If I were in their shoes, I'd rather have, wouldn't you? With like a straightforward, honest, accurate response to their document than to basically say something's got red on it, it's going to look like a report card, and send the report card to 230 people. If I were, if you were Dan and Lucia, don't you think a more respectful approach would be to say, here are this is our review of your document, we recommend you modify it.
Yeah, the problem, the risk with that is what we want them is to get the RTM to approve the budget we sent them. Not clear to me how that's going to do that.
You also run into the
Yeah,
problem.
But is sending, I agree with you. Again,
So-
it's just how you deal with people. Is sending the report card, I'm married to a teacher. Nobody likes to get papers back with red on them, okay? You're going to send it back to 230 people and say, Dan and Lucia screwed up.
The only
Here's
issue,
answer.
the only issue
That's
is
not gonna help.
what we're ignoring. What we're ignoring is that some of the data in their view is not wrong. They want to present it differently. So they'll like the 13 million
And
because
guess
they
what?
think
The
that's the
other-
correct comparison. We think it's the wrong comparison. So there's some subset of that data that you're just on different perspectives.
I'm back with your story, your approach. Let's tell our accurate story in our words.
Why don't we, Bill,
280 people, they're not distributing
I mean, in effect, I mean, to agree with you, just to agree with you.
I would
Both of those didn't
I
have.
don't think we even will need that. We want our response, we want to make all decisions. Establish our position.
Well, they're two different things. Bill is not saying send the red markings to 230 people. Bill is saying send it to the 12 people or whatever's on the budget overview committee. Or just Dan and Lucia.
But I think we should have our own. But I think we should have our own, and that's Leslie's point, and I agree.
Yeah, it would
We
be,
should tell our good story.
right, it would be nice, though I'm not sure I believe what I'm about to say is possible. It would be nice to get an accurate, to get them to make their case using real numbers instead of some of the numbers. Some of them are clearly real, but some of them are not. Because then we could have a debate about budget philosophy and about how much money the town should
I
spend.
agree with you, and I think that
Right.
is achievable.
No, you're not going to have that. It's just not how they've done business in the past. They've always had a measure of hype and exaggeration and doomsday and cherry picking and stuff. You're just not going to get something which is, simply an accurate document on both sides with a slight difference in philosophy. It's not where they are.
But so,
During
so,
this meeting, I was in the hall talking to Dave, it was 2 hours ago. And he said, I didn't ask him to revise this, and I hadn't seen this.
And he said,
I saw this at 6:45 with the rest of you, but he said this is a living document. That sounds like he's ready to change it.
Well,
to
So-
what?
so.
To what?
Yeah,
Right.
just
I
throwing,
think that's treating him with respect.
Okay.
so in many ways, I think that does present a good avenue. But the other thing is, Mike, your chairman's letter, I mean, is that a vehicle that we could use with highlights and get it out earlier rather than necessarily wait to the,
The chairman's letter is intended to be an archive for the town about what budget was sent to the RTM and what our costs were. That's not what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now is we are dealing with. We're in an advocating role, and what we're doing is trying to convince, remember, there was a 9-vote spread last year. 9
Right.
votes. When we started this budget process, we said we need to make that 9 votes. We need to get 25, 30 people
On the other side of that vote, yeah.
on the other side of that vote.
And they have to understand.
And what we're trying to say, budget, I mean, I do plan on standing up for the RTM, I will ask them if we do enough. And I will say, if we didn't do enough, tell me what, tell us what you want to do, because obviously cutting and shifting taxes from one year to another, instead of trying to maintain a stable, I'm ready for that. That's part of the budget message. Well, we're not dealing with budget message here, we're dealing with actually numbers that are inflated, there's a different agenda. There's an agenda with what's going on here, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it, but that's what we're working on right now. We're not working on budget message, we're working on, there's an action, the people that have that, you were chair of the budget overview committee. You never ever put this information like that out. You took positions that maybe you think that Taylor Woodard was the best interest in the town's overall, but you never ever put this information out in order to get blanket reductions in the operating budget. That's what this is. This is an attempt for a blanket change. This is an attempt to change policy. Me personally, I will draft an email to, if I can do it on my own, to Dan, and I will say, look, the document you have us attached is a red line version. And I would say to them, I'm hoping that you're going to review that and correct that, although you've already sent that document out to people. But let me highlight, and I would just take those red bullet points, and I would say, page, boom, this is the real, and I would say, at the end, the goal of the BET was to adapt to what has really happened and make plans for what potentially may happen. And that's really, and by the way, I would carbon copy that email to, I usually do it with district leaders committee chair and the whole budget overview committee, because I want to get on record to say, oh, before you go taking something as gospel, let's hand it out. It's not exactly accurate. And if you notice, there's nothing in that red line that addresses their opinion on them. It's numbers. Okay? I don't think the idea here is to, I don't, their opinion if we did enough or not enough. That's their opinion.
It's also talking points. There's a little difference here between what you're talking about there and
To read our story, I don't think it's very hard.
I want us to be able to go to a meeting and to be able to say, well, you know.
Same thing.
Actually, it's very useful for us to all talk
We're all
at the
saying
same
the
time.
same thing.
You know,
But Mike outlines it in
if you
the email.
visualize our talking points, it's like 5 slides. Jim touched on
Yep,
2 of them when we
it's not-
started the meeting, the columns of figures. They're real clear about healthcare costs and one thing or another. It's a page about fund balance, a page
here.
about mill rates. It's that set of red bullets, or somebody, I think it was Beth, or somebody said, that's the key right there.
Do you think that Dan's going to put those bullets in?
What?
Do you
No, I don't
believe-
think, those belong in our story, I agree with you. That's our story. But anyway, I think to tell our story in 5 slides isn't even hard. It'll be convincing, it'll be a document from which the 12 of us talk with consistency, and it's respectful, and it will be a success. That's not that hard to create, everybody.
Okay. So you have something you're going to do in any case because they wouldn't be surprised to see you doing that, communicating with those people who are sort of in the leadership positions in the RTM and at least straightening out some of this stuff. And Dan and Lucy have seen this anyway, and the finance people have seen it.
They've seen we went through this, and Dan asked me to create data points for him in terms of what debt service is and outstanding debt and things like that. And I sent the last of that yesterday morning. So hopefully he is going to, and they said they were going to issue revised,
All right, so
question
we'll-
that I had is when.
So we'll see if they do. And then in the meantime, I think you drafting something that we can all chew on and play with is a good idea so that we at least describe the budget and the reason the budget is the way it is in a way that's consistent. The thing I struggle with the most is that on the one hand, they want to reduce the amount of money the town has to operate with, and on the other hand, they're worried about all these bad things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, kind of give them the candy, but remind them that it's poisoned. You know, they aren't presenting it like that, but that is where they're headed if they were to get the outcome that they're talking about at the moment. All right. The Finance Committee, this is the last point before we vote on minutes here. You also met with 3 of the people from the Finance Committee. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Well, to begin with, they were somewhat upset with this document and wanted to start the conversation. And we had told them that we had met with, Roland and I had met with Dan and Lucia before, and this document's probably going to be revised. Okay. And they kind of put it aside, and we started to talk about the budget overall. And I think now, I don't know if the 3 of them, it was Michael Warner, Jeff Bardos, and Rebecca Steinfeld, represent, is there 12 of them? Whatever it is, 12 plus 6, you know. But what came across to me was their suggestions were they wanted to increase use of fund balance by $3 million. They wanted to roll back your capital levy increase by the $3 million that you increased it.
Right.
And we told them you can't do either. He says you can't touch revenues. You've got to vote on your appropriations throughout the process. And it kind of like stopped the conversation. But the message I got, and I don't know if everyone's going to agree on that, is they want to dramatically cut the budget by millions. That's the impression I got.
I think it's the same discussion as last year, except this year it's happening in Hartford to justify what they wanted to do last year.
Cutting the budget more.
Yeah.
So how do they think those 2 things are going to help?
I don't know. That I don't know.
Yeah, I can't, I wasn't in that conversation. Okay. Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt. There's there's this tone that exists out there right now that in spite of having the lowest mill ratings increase in decades, and in spite of having the lowest mill rate absolute number anywhere in the state, still people feel like they're taxed too much. You know, we have not succeeded in getting people to feel differently about that. You know, my friends in Westchester would kill to live in Greenwich, but you know, that's not helping us in this conversation. So we'll see what we can put together to help sort of tell the story in a more constructive way. And in the meantime, you'll at least get some.
Just so everybody understands, the timing, Tuesday night, we're having that. Pardon me. No. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, 6 days from now. No, a week from today.
A week from today.
It'll be on Wednesday. I don't know how much the RTM is following. Today's the 18th.
No.
No, you're a week off.
No, the, yeah, right.
So, but whatever the professional review committee has to do, they're going to the committees and districts like we are.
Right.
So they really have next week
For the
to
recommendations.
do this.
Right.
That's really, and then, you know, as far as the other committees, you know, I think there will be some big cuts. It'll be interesting to see where they are. And it'll be like the dump.
Like what?
Well, which is why we need to have at least a consistent starting point when we meet with the districts, so that at least we're all highlighting one set of numbers, so that at least they understand from our point of view why the budget is the way it is.
You know, the capital tax levy is an example. We preserved capital tax levy for capital projects. In other words, we preserve our capital infrastructure, keeping up with our infrastructure. So that's what we did. We didn't go and do it in the operating budget. If we get cut revenues for things that we use for operating or prevention hits, we stayed on the capital side. We understand this, but when I see how long it took this group to go through this document, I say to myself,
That's what I'm concerned about.
that's where it's gonna, because at some point in time, you just gotta fight it. Sometimes you have to, I suggest everybody think about getting a buddy to go to your committee district meetings with. I mean, we all have to sign it, but. No, but it's just because the truth of the matter is, by the time we get to those committees and districts, it'll be a question, did we straighten out this information and get it revised or not? That's what it's going to come down to. If people are operating off of incorrect numbers, there's no argument. If they want to pull $1 million out of the fixed charges healthcare line,
Are we thinking, let's say you're going to work on talking about, are we thinking that then we distribute those not only to get verbally distribute them? That could be effective, I think, if you actually have them in writing as opposed.
Yeah.
If we were to do that, then I don't know whether procedurally we have to take that up next Monday, meeting, just to say, well, you
don't need
approval. I already went with the vote.
everybody's going to use the talking points
I
of
know
their
talking
choice.
points, but I
Like to
I
make
think
sure
it would
you-
be effective.
Let's see them first.
Maybe bring them with us, or 12 of us going into 12 districts, and bring it out for each, and that's what I think was the. But I think it's good to have something.
But this should be done before the DOT meeting.
Yeah.
I know-
The Tuesday meeting, yeah.
I'm away.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
I would love to. but I-
So I'm here on Tuesday, but not on Wednesday. Who knows? It's their meeting, they get to make the rules. Well, if
Let's see the draft. I'll certainly seek input from many of you as we go through this, and I'll try and do it in a short time frame. I don't want to, hopefully by Friday.
Yeah, well, that way we have it in our hands Monday when we meet. We meet Monday, right? Our meeting's Monday, so we'll have it in our hands by then.
I'm not putting anything on our agenda Monday night for this conversation.
Okay. All right, we need to vote on Minutes.
You know, everybody's going to
You're
have that.
creeping.
But, we'll see each other Friday.
Oh.
More
So,
typos?
sorry,
Did you already
the
do
meeting
it?
isn't quite
Oh, I
over
caught
yet.
this one.
What are we doing?
Are we moving to minutes?
I was going to.
Oh,
And
I didn't mean moving.
okay.
The next.
So why don't I just make a motion?
What are we doing?
I move the minutes one by one? Will that get people's attention back? I would move the approval of the minutes of Thursday, February 2nd, the so-called Day 2.
And I will second those minutes.
Just to clarify, there have been a couple, I'll characterize them as typos, but they're slight wording, slight changes in some words, not in anything substantive, which have been picked up by other members of the BET, which I will
Give to Kathy.
Kathy. But I don't think our minutes need to specify
Well, then,
specific.
subject to those corrections, how's that?
That's good for me.
So Kathy, you'll send us a marked version of how they changed or something?
Do you really want them marked?
I don't know, is it,
It's like changing the word accomplishment to accomplish,
No,
to
no,
change
no,
Beth
no,
to
no,
Elizabeth,
no,
to
no.
change HAS to HSA, that kind of thing.
No.
They're
No.
nothing substantive.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
just errors.
Well, can we vote on them as a package then?
I think
you
it's
wanna
always
do them
good
one
to
at a
have,
time?
I think it's good to have them one at a time. Oh, you can do it as a package. You want to do them as a package?
Whatever you want.
Okay, so.
Well, you moved the first one.
So it's already moved. Take a vote.
We need a
No,
second.
yeah, I'll second it, but I'll add, why don't you just add it? Jim
Just
says,
move
just
them all.
move them all.
All right, tell you what, I'm going to amend my motion. I would move the approval of the minutes of Thursday, February 2nd, the so-called Day 2, the minutes of Monday, February 6th, the so-called Day 3, the minutes of Wednesday, February 8th, the so-called Day 4, the minutes of Wednesday, February 15th, which I think was a consolidation day, am I not mistaken?
No.
No, sorry.
Day
Oh,
5.
Day 5, beg your pardon. And the minutes of Tuesday, February 21st, which was consolidation day, and the minutes of Thursday, February 23rd, which was a decision day. I'm going to wait for a moment with the minutes of the regular meeting.
Okay, so I will second all those minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Now,
400.
and then one more motion, if I may. I'll also now move the approval of the minutes of Monday, March 2nd, which was
20th.
March 20th, which was a regular meeting of the Budget Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate your patience. I thought having that conversation was
No, it's good.
necessary. And
Thank you.
thank you. All right, we're adjourned.